Alright, hello and welcome. So today we're going to talk about the GOAT, we're going to talk about Oberon, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't have a good reason to talk about Oberon, but the reason that I do have is that this dope Blade of the Lotus skin came out for him, and I think he looks better than he has ever looked in the past, and hey, he kinda needs a build refresh anyway. So let's just get started. First and foremost, we're going to do a quick refresher on the Eidolon build for Oberon. This runs Arcane Nullifier to make it so you can ignore all magnetic procs. I know Oberon can technically do that already with his 2, but this makes it so you don't have to waste the energy on your 2 to do so. It just makes the fight more convenient in general. Phoenix Renewal for carrying pug groups. Obviously, replace this if you're going to go solo, or if you're going to go with a group that's probably not going to die, but you could leave it in for that too. And this uses Hunter Adrenaline and Rage together to give you functionally unlimited energy whenever you take damage, and enough power strength to keep your lures alive and hopefully your team as well. And using Deadeye so that you can do good damage with your sniper rifle or buff up one of your teammates' sniper rifles so that they are more likely to one-shot the limbs of the Eidolon. That's as far as I'm going to go into detailing this build. I have an entire video on soloing the Eidolons with Oberon, so if you need that guide, I will link it down below if you want to check that out. But moving on to a more normal build for Oberon, we're going to be looking at this build today. So this build, I know I call it normal, but it uses an Umbral mod. That's just because it fits, honestly. And on the topic of just because it fits, if you are going to forma your Oberon Prime from scratch, a thing that you can do, instead of doing what I did before the Umbral mods existed and went with a V and a D polarity, you can put a V and a dash polarity in for stretch, and instead of using Vitality, you can use Umbral Vitality if you're planning on maxing out that mod along with Umbral Intensify, and that is a technically better build. Do I think it's worth an extra forma investment at this point where I've already invested the 2 forma? Not really. It's a really small upgrade at best, but I just wanted to point that out for anyone who is looking to farm and then forma Oberon from nothing. With that, this build is just really well-rounded. It's got enough range that you can strip armor from groups of enemies whenever that is needed. It's got like a lot of survivability. It's hard to die as Oberon at the current point as long as you are mildly careful a little bit, which, to be honest, can be difficult sometimes whenever enemies don't matter for like a good curve of a survival, and then you're like, oh shit, these enemies can suddenly hurt me. You know, there's that breaking point that you need to watch out for, and it does happen, but by and large, in most of the content in the game, once you have your 3 and your 2 combination up, enemies just don't really hurt you at all, so that is very nice. And that can, of course, apply to your team as well, because his 3 is a team heal. With that, I'm using Arcane Consequence and Mobilize to be very, very fast. Being fast, I think, is quite underrated in Warframe, even though it's the thing that we probably do the most. And you definitely want Arcane Consequence if you're going to be doing, like, bounties with Oberon or something. With that, I'm also using Arcane Energize. It exists on this build. I threw it in here just because, like, what you throw in here is not really a thing that matters. Like, I really enjoy Arcane Consequence because it makes me quick. Arcane Energize, I have Hunter Adrenaline. I'm going to have pretty much functionally unlimited energy anyway, but I just threw this in here because I didn't know whether or not I wanted like a sniper specific arcane, one of the pistol specific ones, or whatever. So throw whatever arcane you want in here. Energize, very much not needed, but it is technically helpful. With that, let's just talk about some things that are quirky with Oberon, because he does have some weird bits to him, and his abilities work together in a ways that are... Actually, I don't think they're mentioned in his abilities screen, but I'm not 100% sure. We're going to go over them anyway. The first thing, though, that I know is not mentioned in his ability page, though, is his 3. So his 3, get 3, you put it down, you start healing, right? You see that little wave that went out whenever I cast this? See that little white area that kind of dissipates into nothing? So that gives you a kind of hint, I suppose, that this is an AoE that sticks around. This AoE, if any allies enter it, they will get your renewal buff. So you don't have to like just jump on one of your teammates' dicks and then recast your 3 to give it to them. they can just come to the AoE and pick it up. This is incredibly important because it is the factoid that makes Oberon the #1 defection game mode runner. So if you're looking to farm Harrow, Oberon is definitely the best at that. And I know defection, aside from getting Harrow, has no purpose at current, but if you wanted the Warframe who's like the best at defection, it is Oberon, for those who were wondering. And then in addition to your, like, those things with your 3 and it healing and all that business, if you put your 2 down and then you step into your 2, you get armor. This armor will stick to you as long as your 3 is active. This is for you and teammates. And your 2 also is an AoE that does radiation damage and does radiation procs as well. And that stuff's not really important. This is pretty much just for giving yourself armor, but that's kind of fine. Other than that, your 1 is useful in some fairly niche scenarios where you have a high health enemy that doesn't have a ton of armor, although that does come up sometimes if you're going to fight Sordy Keladathame, for example. Using your 1 on Sordy Keladathame will rock her fucking world. She hates that shit. So if you're looking for an easy way to do that, Sordy, or a few others, Oberon can do that. And then the only other thing to note is that if enemies are on your 2 and you hit 4 on them, they will lose a percentile of their armor. And in this build, it takes, I believe, 2 casts to completely strip all armor from them. Yeah, so I have 66% armor reduction, and that is additive, not multiplicative, which is important because it's significantly more useful when it's additive. To reduce enemy armor. So 66%, usually 1 cast is enough to make enemies like trivial to deal with, but if you really want to fucking rock their world, you can hit it twice. And we're going to be showing that off in the test we're going to do, because for the test, I'm going to be using the Piranha Prime, because one of the nice things about Oberon removing armor is that you get to use some weapons that are more on like a kind of for fun setting, like the Piranha Prime, because when enemies don't have like that massive amount of armor that it's hard for the Piranha to work through, it can dish out a lot of damage. So let's jump in here. This is going to be pretty much the normal test, just at level 80, and you're going to see that it's not going to be very difficult for Oberon to get through. It's worth noting, though, that if you are super careless, you definitely can die here, because enemies do a relatively significant amount of damage. If you just, like, for example, the enemies that are behind me right now, these guys do a lot of damage. You don't want to let those guys hit you. But if you're just, like, mildly careful, you can kind of just, like, you know, walk around in it, and it's kind of whatever. And then these armored dudes, just see the 2 casts here. Boom, no armor. Fantastic. And then you can just eliminate these enemies that now have no armor very easily, just with no problems at all. You can see just 1 cast is enough to make their health just absolutely trivial. And I believe I got this one earlier. Yeah, that one already had no armor. Yeah, removing armor from armored enemies basically makes them not exist. So, very useful. You can just have a fun time with the Piranha Prime. And also just to, like, show off the Arcane Consequence plus Mobilize stuff. Like, you can bullet jump crazy far and crazy fast, so much so that you get the noise a little bit for like volt speed and all that business. But yeah, that's generally how Oberon will handle groups. Because of Hunter Adrenaline, you have functionally infinite energy, so you can just kind of shit out your abilities and do whatever you want, because you're mostly invincible to any enemy that's like below level, let's call it like level 140, 130, as long as you're careful. But yeah, that is Oberon. That is the refresh on him. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I will see you tomorrow.